mentioned, I'm Paul Huber with Rooted. We're a nonprofit in Madison focused on food access, land access, and urban ag education. As a part of a series where we wanted to offer some education around handling produce, washing produce, packing produce safely, and some different structures that you can use that are to do that are simple and affordable and accessible. This is part of kind of a series of events where we're going to also be talking about having a field day where we demonstrate this on site in Madison, Wisconsin. And want to thank Annalisa. I'll turn it over to you, Annalisa, to take it from here and tell us more about all your experience with these different structures. And thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. My name is Annalisa, University of Minnesota Extension. So I work statewide with fruit and vegetable farmers, and I focus on food safety. So the on-farm food safety, I have colleagues that work in processing and sort of prepared foods, cottage foods, value-added foods, but I really focus on the food safety during the handling, harvesting, washing, packing, holding on the farm. I've been in this role for about 12 years now, and I get to travel all around the state and the region, and it's wonderful. It's really nice to be able to work with growers. Over the last year, I've had the pleasure of really focusing on post-harvest handling and pack shed kind of infrastructure questions, as these really kind of rose to the top of some of the needs of growers. So food safety focuses on many things, one of those things being sort of post-harvest handling. And what I kind of heard over and over was growers saying, yeah, we understand. We also want to have good food safety, but kind of the how, like what, I don't have $100,000 to build a beautiful new fully enclosed pack shed with a poured concrete floor. Can you help me kind of get from what I have now, which might be no post-harvest structure, to something that is safe, with the idea that as my farm grows and as my cash flow grows, I might be able to afford a bigger structure one day, but with the knowledge that we can have great food safety and great quality of product with something that is much lower cost. So we've spent the last year sort of developing those systems, and we're still working on it, but we've got, we've worked with a lot of growers and kind of honed some systems that I'll share today. We do have a couple of very short polls just to kind of hear who's in the room. So Paul is going to launch the first poll. It looks like if you're on a phone, sometimes these can be a little funny, but just do your best. So there's just one question there. It says untitled question 2, but you don't have to answer that one, just the one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Half of us have less than an acre. Okay, good to know. All right, second poll, Paul.
Shoot, it's not letting me
Oh,
launch this one. Do you have to
okay.
close out the other one? Let's see. Poll 2. There we go. All right.
I'm going to end this poll too, and we have about half as educational TA providers and half as beginning growers. Excellent. And the last one. Where do you sell? Very diverse. Love it. Pretty typical. Yeah, these answers are pretty typical of the growers here. We tend to have smaller, more diverse growers. You know, we have to have a diverse income stream. So excellent. Thank you for taking a moment and doing that. Are we all set with interpretation? Feel free to chat anything in if there are any issues. Otherwise, I will just proceed. Excellent. Well, thank you again for having me. My colleague Ariel Pressman was a longtime grower in western Wisconsin at Seed to Seed Farm, and I've hired him as a consultant over the last year and a half, really helping me develop these materials. So I'd like to give him credit as somebody who's really taken the time to develop these materials as well. So we're really going to be focusing on post-harvest handling and food safety. We'll talk through some washing strategies and ways to reduce risk in the washing step. First of all, what needs to be washed. Then equipment and infrastructure ideas for how to do that safely. Design ideas, implementing the ideas. Like I said, sometimes people say, yes, I also would like to have good food safety, but you know, let me know how to do that, where to get this. We have a fact sheet that we'll share with you. It's a pretty long, I should say it's almost a manual. It's about probably 9 pages, and it has a lot of the suppliers, so you won't need to take notes or anything. And then I will also briefly talk about coolers. On-farm cooling is extremely important as well for product quality. So food safety really goes hand in hand with product quality. A lot of growers over the last few years took advantage of farm to school, LFPA, farm to hunger relief. These sorts of grants came through. While some of them have now unfortunately kind of been rolled back, I don't think this market is going anywhere. So basically, as you scale up or, you know, find markets beyond a farmer's market where potentially, I mean, food safety still matters, but potentially the customer is not asking a lot of questions about food safety at a farmer's market. At a wholesale level, and now when I say wholesale, I do not mean a large wholesale. Anything I consider wholesale, anything where you are selling to anyone other than the buyer. So when you're selling to a school, a hospital, a food shelf, anybody who's going to be distributing that food, they really often care about food safety, consistent quality, shelf life. I work with schools that take in product and then distribute it to a few different schools. That product needs to last for up to 2 weeks sometimes because of delivery schedules and inventory. They're not going to be using it the day that you're harvesting it like I might do if I buy at the farmer's market. So shelf life becomes really important and quality. And since we're all Midwestern, it's possible that your buyer in a school, for example, might not tell you, your lettuce, your peppers just did not hold up in our refrigerator. They might just not purchase from you again. So we're going to talk through post-harvest and how that really can go hand in hand with your quality desires and goals for your farm. It shouldn't be something separate, but in some ways it is separate and something to think about pretty specifically. If you haven't attended a longer food safety training, I offer with my team here more comprehensive food safety trainings that are online during the winter, and we'd be happy to have you there. Paul, I see things coming in the chat. Just feel free to break in anytime. So a lot of our products will be washed, potentially by us on the farm, but definitely by our customer. I would suggest if your customer asks, do I need to wash these greens? Are these triple washed? You can say, I farm rinsed them. You will need to wash them at home. You are not a facility like they have in, Salinas Valley in California, where they have huge processing facilities, everything stainless. They are not a sort of semi-enclosed area. That product is being kind of washed to a different standard. You can't be responsible to wash things to that standard. There might be a little bit of soil left on it. So first of all, your customer should wash everything you give them. But also, rinsing does not eliminate those germs that might be on the product. So when I talk about germs here, I'm talking about bacteria and viruses primarily, and they come from poop. They come from poop of animals and people. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about food safety. We're not talking about pesticides. We're talking about microbiological things that we can't see with our visible eye, but that can make us quite sick. If you have been unlucky enough to have had a foodborne illness, it's not fun. Unfortunately, sometimes it's more than throwing up or diarrhea. Those are not pleasant. It can be even worse. It can cause kidney failure. It can cause long-term issues that are very, bad for our customers. So we don't want that. So these bacteria that come from poop are sticky. And to protect themselves, they have a barrier, more or less, that allows them to hang on to those surfaces. And you can see in this picture here on the right, those are E. coli, and that's how tiny we're talking about. That is a piece of lettuce, and that is a stomata where the leaf respires. And the E. coli is that small that they can actually climb into the lettuce. So our goal is to not have those E. coli on the lettuce at all, because we can't wash it off. They're sticky and they can actually internalize down into the lettuce. A lot of that starts in the field. We're not harvesting things with any visible contamination. If it's got deer poop by it and it could have splashed up on it, don't take the risk. Don't sell it and harvest it to anybody. If you'd like to rinse that and eat that for your own lunch somewhere, that's your call. But you don't get to make that decision for other folks. Especially our younger and our older consumers, we don't know their health status, and it just takes a little bit of those cells potentially to get them ill. So our first step starts in the field. We're not bringing stuff into the pack shed with contamination, but we're not going to talk more about that today. In a larger GAPS class, we would be talking about that. But we're going to be focusing on post-harvest. So some produce does need to be washed to remove that visible soil. If you showed up at a hospital that you got a contract with to sell, 300 pounds of carrots, and those carrots were caked in field soil, I don't think they would appreciate that. Their drains probably would not appreciate that. They don't want soil coming in their kitchen. So you're going to have to rinse some product. Not all, and we'll talk about that next. But if you could please chat in, look at this photo on the right. We've got folks washing some salad mix. What are some potential risks that come to mind in this scenario? How could the bacteria be spread in this scenario? If you've washed things, think about your own commodity if you don't grow greens. Will and Lynn says dirty water. Okay, Nathan says the tubs themselves are the infrastructure. Hand washing, says Rhonda. Richie says commingling of the product in that water and dirty water, not changing it. And Joseph says the bins are too close together. Dirty hands. Excellent. So you've really identified some of the ways that the hazard, which is the fecal contamination, could be entered into this scenario and cause a risk. The hazard is the poop, and the risk is the potential for it to make your customer sick. It could come in on dirty hands. If you just came from using the bathroom and you didn't wash your hands and you submerged them in your wash tank, absolutely you could introduce some fecal contamination. The other way is just via this water. So in post-harvest, we've got a lot of water going on. And a lot of small farms were doing dunk tanks similar to this. I bet this looks kind of familiar. So they're taking their salad mix and they're putting it in water to crisp it, to bring it down to temperature, and to remove soil and sand. So the risk here is that commingling in the dunk tank, because if some of the lettuce had contamination that may or may not be visible, the water is really good at spreading it around. Water does this very well. So if you picture poop coming in on one lettuce leaf, it's now potentially on all of them, being a pretty significant risk. And I will say that there have been outbreaks traced back actually in Wisconsin. It was peas, not lettuce, but salmonella. People got quite sick. A number of people were actually sent to the hospital from peas that had been washed in a dunk tank, and they had a lot of bird poop on them. They put them in a tank, they spread it all around. They came out, they looked clean, but that water spread it around and actually made a small problem worse. So that's why we're going to talk about water and kind of like washing safely here. So the first question is what to wash, because not everything needs to be washed. Before I go to the next slide, I'm going to ask you guys, because you had really good answers for the last one. What are things that you do not wash on the farm that you harvest? Basil, pumpkins. Okay. Joanne doesn't wash any of the alliums. And this really varies farm to farm. Some of us, if we're selling onions for fresh consumption, right then we probably will be washing. If it's more of a storage crop, you might not wash. Emily is not washing potatoes. Again, that's probably storage versus fresh market right then. Seth is not washing green beans. Yep. So take a look at that list. And I hope one of the things that you leave with today is the idea that potentially you might be washing too much. I think a lot of our growers are really kind of used to have this knee-jerk sort of, well, if it come out of the ground, we have to rinse it off. And the reality is you really don't. There's no food safety requirement for it. There's no regulatory requirement to wash your vegetables. If it is visibly dirty, a lot of greens probably going to be washed, for example, root vegetables probably going to be washed, but other things, tomatoes, winter squash, a lot of these things really probably don't need to be washed. So always ask, why are we washing it? And I will tell you, if the answer is, we've always done it this way, that might not be enough of a reason to continue doing it. I don't know, Ed back 40 years ago told me to wash it. Well, think about it. Do you really need to wash it? Also ask your buyer. If you are selling to somebody who's not just, the folks at the farmer's market, ask them. And they might say, oh, no, you don't need to wash that. Nope, we're going to wash it. As long as it's not filthy, just a little bit of sand or something, no problem. So definitely ask them. Here's some ideas that we had, which completely go along with what you all just shared. Often we are not washing tomatoes across the board here in the Midwest. Other parts of the country, they harvest green, they do herbs, often not washed, depends. Berries, not washed, and some things that are going to be for storage. The maybes are really depending on your setup. If you're growing on black plastic, your stuff is probably really clean. If you're growing in a high tunnel, it's probably really clean. So you probably don't need to wash. If you are growing beans in the field without black plastic, you might need to. But try to err on not washing if possible. The caveat is that we also cool, right? So I recognize that we are not just washing to remove soil, it's also to cool the product. So that's why we're going to talk through some strategies to wash. I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way so that you didn't think that I was saying wash everything, because we're not. But those bottom things, the greens, collards are often cooled. Broccoli, if we're growing organically, is often submerged to let the worms come up. Greens to remove the soil. Root crops to remove the soil. So here are some designs that we have come up with. So I'm going to kind of talk through different components of all of them. Before we get started, could you also just share what kind of pack sheds you have? Just take a moment and write in the chat. Do you have, say an outdoor open pack shed like this, or do you have a fully enclosed sort of building, or do you have no pack shed? Okay, some of us are washing in hoop houses, pretty common, or none. Willowlyn has a lean-to. Daniela has an enclosed area in a pole barn. Also very common to have sort of a section of an older barn that you're rehabbing to be your washing area. Yep, Willowlyn, we took the third picture up on the Iron Range in your neck of the woods, enclosed. Okay, well, good. Thank you for doing that. Hopefully you will be able to kind of pull from these different designs into whatever works for you. I recognize everybody has different goals and sort of setups currently. So the first two are a carport, and that third one is just an open lean-to. So this is a little bit more information on that carport. So you could do a market tent. That would be another option. We all know that market tents blow around a lot. If you are comfortable putting up and taking down a market tent pretty much daily, or if you want to spend more money and buy an expensive one, you could go the market tent route. But for the sake of kind of creating a system that's a little bit more long lasting, we went with the carport. So this is a carport from Shelter Logic. I will say that we looked into trying to find shelters that are, the outsides that were more transparent or translucent so that light would come in. And it was very difficult to find that, unfortunately. This model here in the middle, you can see that it is lets more light in. That was available from Costco a number of years ago. That's my colleague Ariel on the left there at his farm. It doesn't seem to be available anymore. I wish it were. But if you could find a carport that had light, the sort of material that would let light in, that would be better because light is good. So you can see that this is enough for two people front and back to be, two stations to be washing simultaneously. We have a fact sheet again that kind of talks through the suppliers and also the sizing, because I can't remember. We've set up so many of these this summer. I can't remember the size of all of these. This was probably like, 20 by 10. So we put plastic pallets on the floor. First, we put landscape fabric. It's really important to keep the weeds down. And then we put plastic pallets on top of that for a floor. So that's kind of your first thing to think about is a floor. It's really important to not have just be standing in mud. If you were on a grassy area, you could just stand on the grass as long as there is good drainage. I would encourage you, though, to consider having some sort of a floor. I think that it keeps, it's just more kind of a nice area for your employees to be, for you to be, keeps bugs away, keeps mud down. The plastic pallets, I will say it's really important to get the reinforced pallets. They say sometimes that they are rated to hold a lot of weight, but that weight is when it's kind of dispersed over the surface as opposed to a person who's standing there, they can break. So make sure to get kind of nicer ones. We found these used at a place called Pallet One in Minneapolis. I'm sure there are other options around because they are a little expensive new, but I will tell you there's so many of these things available secondhand. It's also important you see the pallet on the front outside. That's kind of the staging area. If there was enough room, it would be really nice if that was in the shade as well, because if you bring your collards in and it is noon and that sun is beating down, one of the most important things you can do for product quality is to get it out of the sun. So they did actually move that pallet in, so the staging area was inside in the shade.
I
So
just
that's
have
something to
a
consider.
quick clarifying question here, which was what is the plastic floor? And I'm assuming the answer here is that they're the plastic pallets, but if that doesn't answer the question, maybe you could have a follow-up question here.
Yep, that's all it is. They're plastic pallets put together. They're not, attached to each other in any way. You could use wooden pallets. I know many of us have a lot of wooden pallets lying around. Wooden pallets break really easily. If you were able to find heavier duty wooden pallets, you could use those instead. Just be careful. I've seen so many broken wooden pallets and it becomes a safety hazard to you and the folks working for you. I have other pictures, but I will just point out you can see that we have shelving in there. Shelving is another really important aspect here. You want the ability to put your things not on the ground. Consider this like a food preparation area in a kitchen, or if you've ever worked in a hospital or in a food service area, you don't put your food on the ground. So that would apply here as well. So have a pallet there that you can put your totes onto, and then you can use those shelves to put your totes, your cleaning supplies, your rubber bands, get the plastic Tupperware Rubbermaid containers that have the lid that seals. And then in this environment, animals might come in there, right? It's just open. But if you've got things sealed off, then you know that they can't be running over your rubber bands and your other items, your twist ties.
There's a quick question about whether the pallets have tarp under them, and that's kind of an important point. I'm guessing you don't want tarps because they don't allow water through, and you do want landscape fabric, correct?
Correct. Yep, that's a landscape fabric. We used a higher weight landscape fabric that kind of it's almost plasticized like a pretty heavy duty landscape fabric. It still lets the water in, but it doesn't rip as much. If you get the thin kind, it will rip more readily. So we just put that down. We use the stakes, nothing fancy. So I'm going to show some other photos. I will just say the carport can be difficult to put up. So we had 3 different people building a carport, and one of us, not myself, is a pretty adept carpenter and builder. And we figured it out, but it took some hours. It took 3 of us, maybe 3 hours to put up this relatively small pack shed. So just something to consider. I wish it were a little bit easier. The instructions were not much help, but we figured it out with some real basic tools. So if you are someone who is very scared of building, just know that you'll probably have to bring in someone who can give you a hand. Make sure to buy one that is rated for wind and rain, or add your own sort of modifications afterwards to make it more stable. So this model was about $300, so pretty cheap, and it did not come with a lot of the extra bracing. So what we did was we added our own bracing in afterwards. We just put PVC in crosswise across both of those openings there so that it did not shift in the wind. This was a pretty windy site. So know your own site and make sure that it won't, if we have a big thunderstorm, that it doesn't get blown over. I would suggest taking the cover off in the winter. You don't have to, but it will last longer if you just take that cover off in the winter. You can see here that we have that landscape fabric. In this one, we opted to just use the landscape fabric and not the plastic pallets because that's what the farmer asked for. And I have to check in with her. It's been about a month since we built this, but last time I was down, it was holding up. It was just fine without the plastic pallets. So something to consider. It's really your preference. The main thing is that it keeps the weeds down and it's really helping with the drainage. And we'll talk through drainage because that's really important. So the wash tanks themselves, people use all kinds of different things, but these are those rigid foam stock tanks that are available from Fleet Farm or Tractor Supply, not from Menards, I've learned. They come in all different sizes. And the one thing I would consider is to make sure that you have it at an appropriate height. I see people bending over, and think about your body and your back, especially as some of us get a little older. It's really important to not be bending over all the time. So use cinder blocks, get it at a comfortable height. These are 100-gallon tanks. They also make much more shallow tanks that are maybe a 50-gallon. Kind of think, how many bunches am I going to be processing at once? How much product? So at this farm, they were bringing in 20 cases of kale or collards at once. So a small, a 25-gallon or something just would not be enough for them. But if you are really on the more kind of community garden scale, large garden, small farm, quite small farm, you might get by with much smaller one. And the benefit of smaller is it doesn't take as long to fill and empty. And that's a real thing, as many of us know. So kind of right size it to you. The other thing to see are the hoses. I have a better photo. This was kind of mid-build, so they were just kind of draped across there. But have the hoses hanging from above whenever possible. I know many of us really love having a hose coming down from the ceiling because you can just quickly grab it and spray and fill your tank. As opposed to on the ground, it becomes a food safety risk and it's a tripping hazard. It's just not handy. So here's a better picture of the hoses coming off the ground or coming off the ceiling. And you can see we bought pretty heavy duty hoses. Hoses, I would suggest going as heavy duty as you can. And we fill them up there. We put a on and off valve at the end, which is a really nice thing. So you don't have to go all the way back to the valve to turn it off. You can put a quick connect on there for a sprayer if you like, if you want to have a hose end sprayer for spraying things off. You can see the shelves in the background. The hoses we attached to the purlins that are the structure there, we attached with zip ties. Nothing fancy, but they've held up pretty well. And the other thing is then we had, I didn't show a picture, but we have a manifold with say 3 to 4, a splitter, so that you can have a hose going to each individual one, kind of at the top where your supply comes in from your well. Then you're going to have your manifold with 3 or 4 different hoses, and then those will be going to your individual spots. And I will say, it seems kind of small, but you can put a lot of produce through these. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars of produce can be washed safely in this area as long as you are keeping it really organized because it's a relatively small site. A little bit about drainage. It's really important. I will say that I've spent way too much time in the Menards plumbing aisle this summer trying to figure this out. Like many things, there isn't an off-the-shelf kit for this. So we have figured it out. This is a 100-gallon Rubbermaid tank. The only one that I have found with a 1.5-inch drain, which is bigger than your typical drain, comes from Tractor Supply. The ones from Fleet Farm just have the normal like 3/4-inch hose drainage. So this is a 1.5-inch, which makes a big difference. So it comes with the 1.5-inch drain in it. The other option is you could buy one with a smaller drain, take out that drain, use a hole saw, and put in whatever size drain you want. So that's always an option, and we did do that one time as well. But I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So this one has a 1.5-inch drain. I used fittings from the Menards plumbing aisle, so it's threaded, and it's a threaded male. So I've got a threaded female, and we just put it on there, and then that connects to a 1.5-inch ball valve, which is that blue and white valve there. Then we connected that to a 2-inch lay flat, which drains away. Some people might just open up the valve right there and not use that lay flat, but it's really important for food safety to move that water away, especially when you're doing if you were just doing this once a day, well, that's probably okay. I've been with farmers during washing, and we are emptying the tank 5 times during the day. And if you've got 75 gallons of water in there, it's a lot of water. So using some sort of hose, however you can figure it out to do it, to move it away, is a really good idea. And then just have it go to a lower spot, a grassy area, somewhere where it will soak in. It doesn't need to go anywhere special. Good to go, Paul?
Just a quick clarifying, that lay flat, the question is the lay flat is just fitted over the PVC stub. Do you have some kind of securing band or anything like that?
I do. I have a hose clamp on there. Yep, just a basic hose clamp. You know
And
what?
we haven't, oh,
Sorry, I
go
think
ahead.
this picture was taken before I put the hose clamp on. It's so tight that it possibly wouldn't need it. There's not that much pressure coming out, but I will say a hose clamp is a great idea. So we just bought, 2-inch, 3-inch hose clamps, put them on, and then when you slide it on, then you just tighten that hose clamp, and it's pretty good. I will say the other thing is these are glued together because with the purple and the plumber's glue, because we wanted to make sure that things were going to be really tight. So
Yeah.
it's not as easy to disassemble just, kind of throughout the season. At the end of the year, you could just take this whole thing out by taking the inside part off and removing it. But what you see there, that part sticking out, is all stuck together with that purple adhesive now.
There's another question about using sanitizer, but I figured you might bring that up at a different time.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I did not, I don't have actual slides on sanitizer, but we will talk through that because sanitizer is a excellent step to reduce risk in wash water. Yep. I was focusing here on kind of the infrastructure, but the sanitizer is a great step. So we'll take a couple minutes for that. So then the one on the right, so that's the one on the left. So this is like a demonstration one we did here. The one on the right is actually from below. So I'm going to show you the next. This one is the one that was on the right there. So it's what we did is take a shower drain, and that's what you see there in that picture on the right, just a cheap shower drain. And we used a hole saw, drilled a hole in the bottom of that tank, put the shower drain in, and connected that elbow there, that 45, or yeah, no, it was a 90-degree angle elbow to a piece of PVC, inch-and-a-half PVC that then drains away. Again, it's glued together. And the benefit of this is then all that water at the bottom will go out without you doing the dump that you have to do to get this model to go to fully drain. It's basically just more difficult to fully drain this model because that drain is offset from the bottom a bit. So this is another model. I will say the challenge here is this is a normal garden hose, right? And a lot of the tanks that you find are going to just work with a basic garden hose. It takes a while to drain. So I have it all set up. I haven't done the experiment yet, but I'm going to this week to just see, given a volume of water, say 100 gallons, how fast does it drain with my lay flat versus my garden hose? I think it's going to be a minute or two for the lay flat and about 20 for the garden hose. So it's pretty significant. Again, if you're just doing this once a day, it might be fine. If you're doing it multiple times a day, you might really consider doing a little bit more digging and figuring out how to connect that lay flat. The other thing that you can see in this photo that I like is, oh, it's just cut off at the top, but that hose, you know, we all know when you're filling a tank and you have the hose in it and you want to walk away and then it comes out. So we used a zip tie and we just drilled 2 holes in the side of the tank and put a zip tie in there. And then we also did it with just some wire as well. So it's basically just a holder for that hose. But it's big enough so that the hose, you can pull it out too, but it provides just a little bit of structure there to hold that hose in place so you can step away. Okay, so I think I've covered these pretty well. The one is just that drain below and the one is the drain off. Is there any questions or thoughts that people have about these compared to potentially what you have on your own farm? Okay, well, I'll keep on moving.
One
This,
thing I'll just mention real quick.
yeah,
Have you ever worked with float valves before, Annalisa?
I have. Yeah, I think some people have success with them.
Yeah, that's something that's been nice for us is like a way
Okay,
to really, really walk away once you turn the
right.
hose on.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe at the end I can show a picture of what that's like, but it's something that just screws on the end of a hose so that once your tank gets to a certain level, it just
yep.
shuts the water off automatically, which is pretty nice.
I will just say from a food safety perspective, whatever is kind of in that water, if it's your float valve or the end of your hose, just make sure it's clean. Yeah, it's real nice to have the hose kind of above the water and not submerged. So that float valve, yeah, just make sure it doesn't get too gross.
Got it.
Okay, so this lean-to is nice. It's pretty low cost. They had a lot of the supplies on the farm, so of course that reduces the cost. The what I really like is that it's plumbed. I think one of the major takeaways, if you can kind of think through, is use your own engineering ingenuity that I know a lot of you have and figure out a way to move the water away. So what they did was they used the natural topography, which was a slope down, and they attached that PVC and it just goes down. And then you can see the PVC is also on a slant. And then they attach it to some perforated drain tiling there at the end, and then it goes underground or even above ground. So that's a nice way to kind of just move it away as opposed to just saying, oh, we just let it splash at our feet and, you get a lot of mud. And this is completely open, right? I mean, some people might look at this and say, what, really? People are washing vegetables out in the open? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. If this is what you can afford, you can have good food safety with this model. Just make sure that you are cleaning those tanks or, the sinks and those tables before you put produce on them because you don't know what's been on them overnight. So this is a greenhouse bench. Those are like 1-inch slats that you could put, say, bunches of carrots on. You could put radishes. You can put anything that you're going to spray off there as a spray table. And then they're using those sinks as their dunk tanks. Again, hoses from the top. Another model we did is, this is another carport. This was kind of a mid-size. And this one came with, this was more expensive. This was about $600. It came with those crossbars for support. And for this, we built a frame, a 4x4 frame on the ground. And then we used this product called GeoGrid, which is a plastic, real lightweight, but it accordions out. And then you attach it to the edge there. Actually, you don't attach it to the wood. You just pull it out, and then you use stakes, rebar stakes, put it in the ground. That holds it out. Then we had some pea gravel delivered, and we used wheelbarrows, and we put it all over. And once it settles, it takes maybe a week to kind of really settle. It's very stable. They build driveways out of this. They build roads. So it's not as, hard as concrete, for example, but it's a good product. It does require more construction. We had to build that frame. For example, you have to know kind of how to use the power tools. The other potential downside here is that we lost space on the edge. Those 4x4s, there was a good maybe foot between them and the edge because we just couldn't get them all the way over. So that's a little bit of a downside, just lose a little bit of floor space.
Uh, Annalisa, someone's curious if you did any comparative tests on drainage rates on gravel versus weed barrier.
No, we didn't. And the hard thing is soils vary so much. So we would have to do that on the same soil. I will say that this particular site had really heavy soil. So they were kind of in a valley, they were at a river bottom, and it was heavy. So this would not have been a good site just for weed barrier, for example. If you have more porous soil, or in your maybe you're at a higher part of the farm that might have better drainage, you probably can do just the weed barrier. But basically know your soil, and if you pour a bunch of water out, if you pour a 5-gallon bucket of water on just weed barrier and it pools, well, then you know that you probably need to do something to improve the drainage.
Is that about 3 or 4 inches of gravel with that setup?
Yeah. Yep. It was about 4 inches. So there's more time and expense here. I mean, we had to pay, it was about $150 worth of gravel. The GeoGrid was about $100. Treated 4x4s are expensive. These things do add up. I will say that this was for a kind of a community garden site, and it is pretty permanent. They won't be moving this anytime soon. And so even though things might seem a bit expensive at the beginning, consider that with that investment, it will last for years. I've seen growers buy the junky market tents, and then you have to replace them sometimes a few times a season, for example. And so it does end up being maybe the same cost, just not all at once. So I know that grants, are around. That's why in the fact sheet that we created, we really tried to list the suppliers and the costs so that you can then say, hey, here's some product that I need. This will improve my food safety. And hopefully this would be something that a grant would be happy to help. I'll just walk through some other infrastructure. also really straightforward. I just like this one on the left because they have a pipe elbow to keep that hose up, and then they just used it to fill the water, and so it's not flopping out. And then they harvest their broccoli on the back of their golf cart, and sometimes the tote itself is actually going on the golf cart. Spray tables can be quite handy, whatever sort of spray table works for you. The one on the left is metal, and so it's just that screening that's stretched across a wooden frame. It can't hold as much weight. And they can tear and kind of be a hazard as well, as they're kind of, sharp. They can be a little bit harder to clean. Stuff can get trapped in them. If you can, these ones on the right here are from a place called Web Restaurant online. It's like a restaurant supply store, and they are extremely easy. You snap them together, and they are about $70 a piece. So some money for sure, but very sturdy and super multifunctional. You can use them as a spray table. You can use them to pack boxes on. Things that have lots of uses are obviously quite nice. We designed this. Paul, if you wouldn't mind putting that link in the chat to this one. This is one that we designed a few years ago, and then a lot of growers told us this is way too small for them. But at a kind of community garden scale, you see on the right, you have a spray table. This is greenhouse bench top on the right. It's called a Dura bench. There's sometimes other names for it. And it is 1-inch holes there. It's a nice product. You just simply screw it to the frame. These are really heavy. So these are not extremely portable around the farm, which is a bit of a downside, but they will last for years probably. And then on the left, you have these, gosh, now I'm forgetting. I want to say they were 10-gallon totes there, and they have a drain. And so you could do like a 3-bin rinse for your lettuce, for example. Again, kind of small, so not for everybody, but it's an option.
Maybe you want to talk about the there was a few questions around sanitizer in the water.
Okay,
Um, there
yep,
was one, there was one that was, do you recommend using Sanidate 5.0 or something similar in certain wash cycles? And what are you sanitizing your area with as well?
perfect, yes. Great questions. So there's kind of two different uses for sanitizers on the farm. One is for equipment and tools and surfaces. So this brush washer, she's scrubbing with soap and water, like Dawn and water, and then she's going to spray with a sanitizer like either chlorine or Sanidate. Sanidate, Paul, do you want to just write that in the chat, or I can just
Yeah,
Sanidate. Sanidate is from a supplier called BioSafe. Sanidate is peroxyacetic acid. So it's hydrogen peroxide and water and acetic acid or vinegar. And it is a product that sanitizes the surfaces. You can use it on this brush washer. You can also use it in your wash water. It is approved for organic farms. It is OMRI approved. It's very innocuous. It breaks down in the environment really readily. So a lot of farmers really like that aspect. It is at full concentration a strong chemical though. And it comes in, generally the smallest you can get is like a 2.5-gallon jug. And it is a couple $100. So it's fairly expensive, but you use a very small amount. And I will say I spend a lot of time with growers helping them figure out how much to use based on the volume of their tank or based on what they're sanitizing. So the label will tell you how to mix it, and you need to read and follow that label. And if you can't understand it, then reach out. I'm happy to help, or someone in the state that you're in as well. So for a 5-gallon bucket, you would mix in, for example, you'd follow the label, but let's say it's 3 teaspoons. very small amount to make a sanitizer for the surfaces. So then you'd make that and you'd put it in a spray bottle, and that would be how you could spray off the surfaces there. That same product, that Sanidate, you would add even less amount in your wash water. And in the wash water, it doesn't sanitize the produce, but it sanitizes the water. So if you brought in some lettuce that accidentally had some poop on it that you didn't see, that sanitizer is really good at killing those germs in the water. So the water is very clean and it doesn't spread if it is there. It's like insurance. It's a great product. It also can really increase shelf life as well. I will say it is just a little tricky to set up systems to use for some smaller farms. So if it is something that you would like help with, happy to help with that. It's a really nice product. Also, BioSafe has great support for farms to help them set up their own systems. They work well with small farms. Tsunami is another product that is from Ecolab. In my experience, Ecolab is a little harder to work with for small farms. Ecolab is set up to work with food service, but Tsunami is a little less expensive. Same, very similar formulations, basically the same product.
I guess a couple follow-up ones that are on that topic, and they're two different ones, but they're kind of related. Um, do you use the water quality monitors and any difference in water pH for certain specialty crops versus horticultural produce?
So the water quality monitors, I think that maybe you are referring to checking the level of the concentration of the sanitizer when it's in there. So if that's what you mean, yes, you absolutely, so you should test how much you've put in. So the label will tell you you need in between, for example, 25 and 50 parts per million of Sanidate in your wash water. So you put in the amount and it'll tell you how much to put in. So you put that in and then you use a tester strip and it will turn a certain color. It's not a perfect science, but it will in general tell you if you're in the right ballpark for the right amount of product. So that's not testing the quality of the water. You're not testing for bacteria, but you're testing if it's the right amount of sanitizer. And then the pH, the label also indicates a pH where the sanitizer is the most effective. So I would know the pH of my water. Most of us do. And if it's vastly different from what the label says, you might have to adjust the pH of your water, potentially acidify it, for example. It's not common that people have to do that.
Yeah, Joseph's asking about a TDS meter for checking concentration.
There are different ways to check the concentration. You know, in my experience, if you just follow the label, you kind of don't need to go crazy checking the concentration. The caveat is once organic material is present in the water, the levels will drop. At that point, though, most of us are changing the water. So if the water is dirty enough, if it's turbid enough that you need to change it, and that's just a call that you would make. There isn't like a hard and fast rule, you know. If it looks dirty, it's probably dirty. Then you would change it. Then you would add more sanitizer. So on bigger operations, when you're, you know, using an injector, they have it's all mechanized. You're not doing a tester strip. But if there are other ways to test the levels that work for you, absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that.
Another question was whether you would recommend putting it in a wash cycle before the last rinse or just for the last rinse.
Right. Okay. So, for example, if you had a 3 compartment, like let's say you were doing a triple rinse for greens and all of them just had water, the technical answer is if there's recirculated water, if there's reused recirculated water in a dunk tank and you're putting product in it and commingling, every time you do that, you really should use sanitizer because there's always a risk of cross-contamination. Sometimes people, to save money, don't put it in the first bin. They just rinse the greens because let's say they're really dirty. They'll just wash it without the sanitizer. And then in the second one, they'll use the sanitizer. Sanidate does not say that you have to do a fresh water rinse afterwards. So you wouldn't do a plain water rinse after that. So there's a little bit of your own judgment. Well, to be honest, there's a lot of your own judgment in a lot of this. It's kind of like the risk that you're willing to take on and kind of weighing that with, frankly, the cost. But the best practice is to use sanitizer whenever you're using a dunk tank. If you were getting a GAP audit, a food safety audit, it is required every time. If we're using that as kind of a benchmark of industry standard, it's required to have sanitizer in wash water, in post-harvest wash water. Okay, I'll move on and just kind of go through some final things here. Keeping our packing areas clean and tidy, removing the garbage, removing kind of like culls are really important to keep animals away. Keep it mowed to keep the animals away. Clean that equipment. There's a lot of material.
Sorry, did you have some pictures you wanted to show, Annalisa? I think maybe your share stopped.
Oh, shoot, I can see it. Okay, I will try again. Now?
Yes.
Okay, so starting with clean equipment, cleaning and sanitizing that tools, any of the tools that you're using, the totes themselves, those wash tanks, scrubbing with Dawn and water, and then spraying with a spray bottle with some sort of sanitizer if it's chlorine or Sanidate 5.0. Storing the totes is really kind of an important thing. It's nice to be able to put them on a pallet. I like this setup. They have a tent over it, so it's, you know, keeps the birds off of them mainly. Of course, birds can still come through. Gravel for drainage is really nice. They have a system where the totes that are dirty are right side up, and then once they're cleaned, they flip them over. That keeps animals out, and it also just lets people know that they've been cleaned. So I just wanted to show you this case study here. She has a beautiful farm down in Northfield with really excellent soils, great yields, a long-term lease, but there was no dedicated packing area. So she was washing in basically just tanks on the ground, which might sound familiar because I know a lot of us are kind of in that situation. So we built this pack shed, and this is the one you saw before with just the basic landscape fabric there, some tables. We bought these really pretty inexpensive, like $8 totes on the right there that you see hanging. They're flimsier, but they were really inexpensive from Menards, $8. And we drilled a little hole and put just a small drainage from there. They're small enough that the slow drainage isn't a big deal. And you see the hoses there coming off. And yeah, for, you know, $700 all in, it's a pretty good pack shed. Another one that you see on the left here, this is a before and after kind of shot here, that we just had kind of broken pallets and things on the ground, and we just replaced them with plastic pallets and a spray table with that Dura bench there, with that greenhouse bench top there, just kind of freshened it up. Hand washing is really important. On the left, you see a portable station that you could do. So it just has like flowing water down into a bucket there, garbage can, soap, paper towel. You could also have that on a table. And then the one on the right is something we've been using, and it's just a fish cleaning table, they call them, and you can order them from, you know, outdoor goods stores, Amazon. It's about $80. and it actually drains down. That drain that's in the sink right now goes down into a 5-gallon bucket, and the hose actually just goes right on, and you can move it around and kind of just meet your needs there. So you're not having to refill that 7-gallon tank, which is pretty handy. All right, finally, cooling produce. It's really important for post-harvest quality to cool the product as fast as possible. Not all of us have a nice walk-in cooler, but just in your mind, as you're thinking about how to have the highest quality product, know that the shelf life is really determined by how quickly you can get it down to temperature and what temperature you store it at. This is especially important in the heat of July, for example. So my colleague Ariel, this was his farm. He built this cooler here. You can see it's nothing fancy. It's used cooler panels that he put together, and he was actually able to put it on a pallet and move it around with his Chevy Astro van. So all in about $1,400 for a cooler, and he was grossing a couple $100,000 annually of produce able to be moved through this cooler. So you can do it. Now he used a CoolBot, which I know many of us know is just a mechanism by which you can make the air conditioner be colder. So you can really make sure that it's not, a typical air conditioner isn't going to be able to bring you down to 38, but a CoolBot allows that to happen. So CoolBots are generally a couple $100. The AC unit is going to be a couple $100, and then you just have to have some sort of insulated room. You would not be able to do this in a shed. It needs to be really well insulated for this to work. You could also use a box truck, any insulated area. And that's it. I'm going to put in a plug for our fruit and vegetable news. It's a really nice resource. My colleagues on our fruit and vegetable team write about issues that are happening, a lot of disease, ripeness indicators, weather-related things. And then the Sustainable Ag, SustAg listserv here in Minnesota has a lot of great materials as well.
All right. And Nicholas, if you're there, do you want to share about Go Farm Connect at all? I'm going to. We have a field day happening in Madison that's going to be very closely related to this content. So I'm also going to share a link to that if anybody's interested in making the trip. There's going to be a wash pack very much inspired by Annalisa's work, making a simple structure, and that will be at one farm location, and then the next farm location will be something a little more heavy duty, kind of a hoop house structure to show an alternative that would be a little more permanent kind of structure. Um, Looks like maybe Nicholas is not on the call. Are you there, Nicholas?
Yes, I am here now.
Okay, cool. Did
Sorry.
you want to share about Go Farm Connect?
Yeah, sure. Just a quick plug for the Go Farm Connect organization, which I put the link to the website in the chat. And actually, you can go there on your own. I'm attempting to share my screen, but it's a little too complicated. So, this is a group of farmers and workers at nonprofit farming orgs that helps farmers get connected to programs offered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as well as often like local or state government support, such as Extension, such as Annalisa that you've been talking to. It only operates in Minnesota and Wisconsin, though if you do have questions, we might be able to get you connected to a group in one of the other states. And the gist of it is that there's a lot of the ways the government is supposed to support farmers, does support farmers, and our job is to get that support to, I guess, all farmers. And the government helps in a lot of different ways, including loans for purchasing land or for farm equipment, like the wash pack systems talked about this in presentation that can sort of be considered. There's operating loans or equipment loans. They also do cost sharing for different practices like coop houses or like conservation practices. They do insurance. And it also can be an official from the Natural Resource Conservation Service or another part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture coming out and just talking to you at your farm, looking around at it and giving you advice on different things. It can be giving you advice on how to take care of your soil or citing things like a wash pack area, or just giving you farming advice based on what practices you're doing now, what practices you could be doing. And so, yeah, that's, I think, a big part of the way the government can support farmers. That's not just money, but it's also giving information. So if you are interested, you can go to gofarmconnect.org. And the two things you can do there, you can sign up to get in touch with a connector who can help you with sort of connecting you to USDA staff and also help you get ready to talk to the staff so you have everything in order. On the website, also there's information about some of the particularly useful government programs where you can see sort of a beginning of those programs. And yeah, so Go Farm Connect. The idea is that there's a lot of programs to support farmers, including vegetable farmers, including fruit farmers, flower farmers, including people growing on small areas of land. And the goal of it is to help you get access to them.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Nicholas. For folks, we wanted to, I think, leave a little time for just other open-ended questions. I'm going to launch a couple evaluation polls that we would appreciate if you just fill them out quick so we have a little more kind of information about how useful this was for you. And I'm just going to launch one now, and then we'll launch one more after this. But feel free if you want to just unmute and ask some questions, or if you want to put some questions in the chat. We're happy to just kind of have an open-ended discussion from here.
If somebody's on a small farm, is there, can we still use the food grade bleach in the water?
Yeah, there is a formulation of bleach that is approved for processing water. Most bleaches, a lot of bleaches, are approved for use on surfaces like cutting boards, often on a label, and tools. There are many fewer formulations that are approved for the wash water, but it does exist. If you were certified organic, I don't think that you can use bleach, but a lot of people use it in the wash water. It's a very small amount, so it's not really a human health concern. It's cheaper and generally easier to get than the peroxyacetic acid.
Nicholas, do you want to speak to that question about disaster relief? If you're there. Otherwise, another
Sure.
question
I
would be,
mean, I don't have exact answers right now. I think, yeah, sorry, I was trying to look it up real quick, but I'd say go to that website, and I know there is talk about it. Is the disaster relief is something that we're working on right now because it's something that's, yeah, coming down the line and
so
active
that's
right now.
something people could reach out to USDA about is disaster relief, right?
Yes, and also reach out to Go Farm Connect about sort of what records you need for getting that relief.
Um, well, and then I guess you kind of answered that question a little bit in the chat, maybe, Annalisa, about the non-CoolBot coolers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. Maybe other people do about controllers for non-CoolBot. Yeah, CoolBot kind of has the market on this. They are the one that I know of. They're really a nice company. They're actually a very small company.
And I think the question was kind of like, can you set up something like a CoolBot, but not have to buy the CoolBot? Is seems like the question, right? And something simpler than that. But I think that would be very difficult because the CoolBot actually interfaces with the air conditioner to make it function properly in a way I have not seen any other controller be able to do.
No, I don't think so.
I can
And
add
it's
a little bit. It's basically the same exact thing as a CoolBot, where it actually interfaces with the AC unit as well. Um, it I came across it. I think it's kind of the precursor to
okay.
the CoolBot. In how the CoolBot works, it's exactly the same as a temperature controller where it tricks the AC unit. Um, it's
Got it.
just not as just doesn't have all the bells and whistles and some of the new Wi-Fi monitoring. And it can be a little bit more wiry with a
Mm,
few extra wires, but it's exactly the same thing compared to a CoolBot, where a CoolBot is a all-encompassing module, but it's works exactly the same at a fraction of the cost.
is this something you can buy off the shelf, or do you have to make yourself, or
Um, you you could find it on Amazon everywhere. It's this if you have like a if you raise like reptiles, you might be you might have already have some of these temperature controllers, or I know a lot of people that are doing starters will have like temperature controllers for the starters, you know, the mats and everything. Um, yeah, there's I've come across it. There's quite a few Facebook or not Facebook, YouTube videos, but it's still hard to come across some more like extension stuff
Well,
or
I think
mm,
government.
anything that has a lot of products have something that's a bit of a knockoff, and it's going to take more user knowledge. I mean, you can always, yeah. I think the nice thing about the CoolBot is so many growers, especially maybe newer growers, potentially if you haven't interned on a lot of farms, maybe don't have those kind of skills. So I think the nice thing about the CoolBot is it's relatively straightforward. But yeah, if you don't want to spend the kind of money, you can probably find other options. There were a couple of other questions, Paul. I know we're at 1:30, so if you have to log off, I guess we'll just say thank you, but I'm happy to stay here and answer these other questions quick. Richie said, what was the
yeah.
primary struggle?
Well, and just a note for people that do have to sign off. There's a question about links to photos, and I think we'll be able to send that out to folks.
Yeah, do
Is
you
that
want to
right?
just put that? Yeah, do you want to just put it in the chat right now, Paul?
Yeah, I don't think I got your PowerPoint, but I can share
Oh,
later.
no,
But
not the
I did
PowerPoint. That
I did
the
share the links that you had previously, so I will share those again,
Okay.
so that they're at the top of the list here.
Yeah, that low cost pack shed one. Yeah, but we can send out the PowerPoint too.
Cool.
The primary struggle with Sanidate 5.0 is the proper dilutions, um, dispensing it because it comes in a 2.5 gallon thing with a a multiple 3-inch bung cap on it. You have to figure out a way to dispense that safely. If in very small amounts, like to get a teaspoon or two out of that is kind of challenging. So I like working with BioSafe for that reason, because they have the products there, and it's very inexpensive, a couple dollars for a valve that goes right on top of that you can screw on to dispense it safely. But sometimes even those little things, if folks don't have access to them, they just end up saying, I can't figure this out. It's basically a whole system on the farm that you have to work through. The non-standard volumes is another issue. You have to do some math. So it will tell you how much you need in 1 gallon on the label, or maybe 5 gallons. If you've got 75 gallons, you're going to have to do the math. But I can absolutely help with that. And so can BioSafe. And then Addison asked about rainwater, and I will just say rainwater, if it's collected, not just if it falls from the sky, but if it's collected from a roof and put into a container of some sort held, it's not considered potable water. That generally that water is not going to be safe for post-harvest washing, because it could have a lot of contamination from the roof structure where it was collected from. There are ways to reduce that. You could treat it, for example. A lot of people don't want to do that. So my recommendation would be is if you'd really like to use that rainwater, use it on things, first of all, that aren't vegetables would be the safest bet. Things that are your pollinator garden, you know, any fruit trees that are still fruits or vegetables, but it's so high, if you're watering at the base, it doesn't pose any sort of a risk. You could also, if you really want to irrigate in your garden with it, just make sure it doesn't touch that edible portion of the product. If you've got peppers up here and you water down here, that's kind of a safe bet too. But I would not use that water for washing or hand washing or cleaning.
Gosh. Questions, suggestions on where to find used cooler panels. I don't know the answer to that one. Do you?
I would say Marketplace. Yeah, Facebook Marketplace. If you're a Facebook user, which I am primarily for Marketplace, there are a lot of cooler panels around. People have them in, you know, sitting in the weeds, and they're just kind of sitting there. And so the risk is then that they might be rusted. They might not connect together well. So just like anything, if you get kind of the lower cost version, you're probably going to have to do some troubleshooting to connect them together well. If you want to buy new, you know that they're going to connect together well. Rhonda says permitting concerns for irrigation projects, like setting up irrigation to your field. I don't think that requires a permit.
I'm not quite sure that question. We did install a well on site here, and we did need a permit for that.
Oh yeah, digging a well. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. Maybe that's what you mean.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. I don't, some people maybe also dig ponds. I don't know about permitting on that. That might be an issue too, a thing to consider too.
Yeah, and I've heard some townships, sometimes people think that the water coming off of packing areas needs to be put into a septic, needs to be treated, you know,
Mhm.
and I've talked with other people that confirm, you know, more higher up, confirm that is not accurate. That is not an accurate reading of the
Mhm.
regulatory language. Like this is water that is very lightly soiled, maybe has some sanitizer in it. It really should not need to go anywhere special. I would not irrigate my vegetables or wash more vegetables with it, but just putting it out. If you get pushback from them, I would definitely kind of escalate that and ask around. And I've been asked to write letters to attorneys and things saying, listen, this water does not pose a public health risk. It is not toilet water, and it does not need to be treated as such.
Yeah.
but that's, in my experience, quite rare. Same with hand washing water. It just should go somewhere where it can drain, but it doesn't need to go down, a sewer. Well, thank you for the excellent questions. Great.
Yeah. I'm also, maybe there could be a clarification. I'm not quite sure about this question. Any municipal or public works ordinances or kickbacks on these types of grid projects? Maybe that's related to the earlier question, but I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, maybe it's asking like, is there pushback? Yeah, Rhonda, do you want to unmute and ask?
Yeah, we do have such ordinances here in Michigan where
Yeah.
public works do get involved with the regulatory processes, and that for just typical urban gardens or rural gardens, community gardens, they which facilitate some markets, food co-ops, and that they do regulate the actual acidic uh, value add from the rainwater. Even though it is already regulated primarily with a lot of good monitoring techniques from the public works factor, the ordinances are in place particularly to gauge changes within that region or climate area, and then it also helps us to gauge whether or not is viable for consumption. Now, reason why I'm saying that and why I think that that is something that a lot of consumers would appreciate as a value add is to the fact that the irrigation processes, we have some now in recalls, whereas the shrimp, they have radioactivity in some of them in certain spaces. So some of that pH is coming, or acidic value is coming from rainwater and filtering in. And then, right, you may think that it's not necessarily know where the wastewater is going. We do gauge that here. Part of the Great Lakes. It's important too. And yeah, I think that may be something that needs to be looked at as a favoritism, especially when we're talking about fruits and vegetables consumption, as something that we all can wrap our vision around. Even though a lot of that regulation has been taken out, we here in Michigan opt to keep it in.
I have heard that Michigan regulates the groundwater, the discharge of that water from pack sheds much more strictly than other states. So I should have definitely said, check with your local state ordinances. In Minnesota, it's not, it's acceptable to discharge this water without it being, in any sort of, not treated in any way, but.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate what you both have said because I think it's been confusing as far as Wisconsin law as well. And like a lot of people opt to, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
and then it depends on who's out looking at the farm and how they're feeling that day. It can be challenging.
Right.
But if people have questions, especially around, there's a lot of different kind of inspections that happen, but the FSMA produce safety rule, if you are covered by that regulation, meaning you have to comply with that, I'm happy to answer questions there as well, because a lot of these things will come into play there.
I did want to touch point a little bit more also on how to file a notice of loss for failed and prevented plant acreage. The USDA is having a phase 1 and a phase 2 in reference to that. And there is a form, a CCC 576 notice of loss form put in place that you can fill out with the FSA and the Risk Management Agency. And the final planting date was for, according to comms, was in June 5th, and the final planting date for soybeans was June the 15th. So that report will help you also prepare for non-insured crop disaster assistance programs as well.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Mm.
Well, I'm happy to send you the slides, Paul, and you can send those out to folks.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Annalisa. This has been amazing. And we really, really